Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever is applicable to you. It's a great honor to be speaking to you today. In my talk, I will concentrate on executive remuneration as one of the important governance instruments with respect to accountability. Companies play a key role in shaping good societal outcomes. They create jobs, generate wealth, and offer desirable goods and services to consumers. However, some corporate behavior comes with social and environmental costs, like inequality, pollution, and emissions. This prompted many initiatives like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and private efforts such as the UN Principles of Responsible Investments, Focusing Capital on the Long Term, and the Global Reporting Initiative, better known as GRI. Companies have noted their societal role, as can be seen by the purpose statements of those organizations. Yet a great gap has developed between those purpose statements, which outlines the corporate commitment to society, and executive remuneration that outline what corporate behavior and performance is evaluated and rewarded. This applies both to the set goals as well as to the applicable time horizon. Executive remuneration is contested mostly for its levels, but also for its structure. The structure is often too heavily weighted on short-term financial success. Social and environmental factors are not always reflected in market prices, which means that financial performance alone does not always reflect the societal performance of a company and its impact on the environment. Such societal impact is then clearly incorporated in the company's purpose statements, but remains absent in the remuneration policies. And this creates a weird disconnect. Executive remuneration is a primary governance instrument for boards and shareholders to hold executives accountable. Pursuing a sustainable outcome as defined in the purpose statement requires a sustainable remuneration model. If remuneration is a token of appreciation for a certain performance, the first question is, what performance do you want to remunerate? Often policymakers and governance codes talk about sustainable long-term value creation. This term, however, is not defined. In our view, the yardstick for corporate success would need to evolve from a financial return or outcome to a multi-capital impact measure assessing the financial, social, and environmental impact of an organization. In defining targets, the concept of materiality should be applied to both the financial and non-financial goals. Focusing on materiality is important to balance well between the effects and side effects of target setting. There are clearly positive and negative consequences related to target setting. In the literature, you will find both consequences defined as, on the one hand, what gets measured gets done, versus, on the other hand, a measure that becomes a target ceases to be a good measure. The approach of the Harvard Business School impact-weighted accounts is a promising concept to deal with the concept of materiality and the challenge of managing trade-offs by monetizing the environmental and social impacts of organizations. As impact is a long-term concept, a better understanding is needed of what long-term means and as of when share prices properly reflect the societal performance of a company. To that extent, it would be interesting to revive the earlier study of Professor Easton on the convergence of market valuation and the aggregate accounting valuation. It would be interesting to see whether the timeline of convergence of these two valuation methods is widening by including the externalities, or is the timeline of convergence shortening as we continue to obtain more insights in the externalities, impacting the market valuations? The outcome of such research would also contribute to assess whether the use of shares in executive remuneration is sufficiently addressing the alignment to long-term value creation. Modernizing executive remuneration to stimulate sustainable long-term value creation only makes sense if it influences executive behavior. In order to obtain insights, our foundation started to study the impact of remuneration policies on executive behavior. A lab experiment with 3,000 participants and 6,000 observations confirmed the positive impact of remuneration policies on pro-social behavior as well as on time orientation, the latter measured by the level of R&D investments. The study is now expanded to in-classroom experiments and will also be extended to observe not only individual decision-making, but also the impact of board dynamics and the decision-making. We are happy to discuss this study with universities and business schools, as such insights are very relevant for validating the reasons for changing the current practice of executive remuneration policies. Executive remuneration is one instrument in the set of governance instruments. Like selection and nomination, dismissal, engagement by shareholder and stakeholders, and voting by shareholders. The growing opposition against executive remuneration is starting to impact both soft and hard law. Soft law in the sense of governance codes and stewardship codes. Hard law, as can be seen, for instance, in the recent outburst of Green Deal-related directives and regulations in Europe, like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, the SFDR, for the investors, and the Directive on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence. It remains unclear what the appropriate mix is of soft and hard law to stimulate sustainable change without falling into the trap of compliant behavior, which would only reduce the willingness of companies to innovate. And dealing with societal challenge cannot be done without the innovative power of companies. Last but not least, disclosures are vital for accountability. Although convergence in reporting standards through the ISSB and the European ESRS is picking up, the difference in taxonomy, materiality, and just defining ESG or sustainability remains a concern, as for instance is clearly shown in the divergence in ESG performance reported by the major ESG data providers. Standardization is clearly needed for uniformity and transparency. The Reward Value Foundation is a non-profit think tank working with universities, institutional investors, the business community, consultants, NGOs, and the public regulators to perform research that will support companies to modernize their remuneration policies in support of sustainable long-term value creation. You are invited to join our research and share your insights to accelerate our program and to make executive remuneration a catalyst for positive change. I thank you for your attention.
Frederic, I'm seeing a question coming in the chat, and it amounts to, what are you missing in the current remuneration policies?
Well, thank you, Peter. That is a great question to ask. With respect to what I'm missing, I think what I'm missing in current remuneration policies is really two things, which is on the one hand, the linkage to what is integrated success. So what is a new definition of corporate success? integrating financial and non-financial elements. And the second element is all about the time orientation. So most remuneration policies are too much short-term oriented. The average is about 2 to 3 years for the incentives, which is relatively low if you look at the challenges that we face from a more sustainability perspective. So lengthening the incentive time horizon, as well as including more non-financial elements in those incentive schemes, would definitely an addition that is needed.
Frederic, you focus on long-term impact, but impact is only changing slowly. How do you assess whether a company is moving towards long-term value creation?
The question on the focus I have on long-term impact, Peter, thank you, is I know that impact is a slow-moving concept, and therefore you do not always know whether companies are moving in the right direction. And to get a better insight in that, I think research should be done to understand what companies actually say. So to what extent do they have communications? What do they say about their remuneration? Or specifically, what do they say about sustainability as an organization? What is the outside world saying about that organization on those sustainability topics? And are they dealing with the material relevant topics? And then to test that, to see whether the money is really put to those initiatives and they put the money where their mouth is, you like to understand how that has been incorporated in executive remuneration on the one hand, and on the other hand, how the investments made by the organization in CapEx and R&D are linked to the communication they have on sustainability. So are they investing in the promises they make? It's kind of a conviction assessment that you would like to make. And the insight that we would like to create is, can you from that analysis then also make a prediction whether the long-term impact of those organizations will be better placed if they have the right talk and also the right walk?
Frederic, accountability requires detailed disclosures. What are your expectations on this front?
As for the disclosures, Peter, I think what is really key is that we achieve a standardization not only in the reporting in general, but also in the remuneration report, so that both from a content as well as from a structure perspective, remuneration reports become comparable, transparent, allowing all the different stakeholders to have a clear insight how remuneration has been set, how it's been linked to the performance delivered, and to what extent those targets have been challenging enough for boards to reach. So the quality of remuneration reports, certainly outside the US, can definitely improve from where they are now.